Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Penn Vicarage on this slightly overcast but nonetheless blissfully cool Friday morning. Lovely to see you and welcome to our morning talks for today. I'm delighted to say that over August, my colleagues are going to cover the morning talks, just giving me a lovely month off, which will be great. So next week, we've got Mike giving us a couple of Psalms, and Sue Turner's going to tell us a series about Ruth. Going forward, you've got Glenn's going to give us a session on Galatians. I wanted to do that one. I like Galatians. And Deb's going to tell us about some parables, and Roberta's going to give us some psalms as well. So look forward to those talks over the next few weeks. But I will be back again in September, starting a series on Mark. Friends, we are working our way. In fact, we are finishing today the book of James. And as is always the case with James, he speaks it, he says it the way he sees it. So hard hats on, flak jackets at the ready. Here goes, fasten your seatbelts, James chapter 5. Come now, you rich people, weep and wail for the miseries that are coming to you. Your riches have rotted and your clothes are moth-eaten. Your your gold and silver have rusted, and their rust will be evidence against you, and they will eat your flesh like fire. You've laid up treasure for the last days. Listen, the wages of the labourers who mowed your fields, which you've kept back by fraud, cry out, and the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You've lived on the earth in luxury and in pleasure, and you've fattened your hearts in the day of slaughter. You've condemned and murdered the righteous one who does not resist you. Be patient, therefore, beloved, until the coming of the Lord. The farmer waits for the precious crop from the earth, being patient with it until it receives the early and the late rains. You also must be patient. Strengthen your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is near. Beloved, do not grumble against one another, so you may not be judged. See, the judge is standing at the doors. As an example of suffering and patience, beloved, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. Indeed, we call blessed those who showed endurance. You've heard of the endurance of Job, and you've seen the purpose of the Lord, how the Lord is compassionate and merciful. Beloved, above all, my beloved, do not swear either by heaven or by earth or by any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no be no, so you may not fall under condemnation. Are any among you suffering? They should pray. Are any cheerful? They should sing songs of praise. Are any among you sick? They should call for the elders of the church and have them pray over them, anointing them with oil in the name of the Lord. The prayer of faith will save the sick, and the Lord will raise them up, and anyone who's committed sins will be forgiven. Therefore, confess your sins to one another and pray for one another, so that you may be healed. The prayer of the righteous is powerful and effective. Elijah was a human being like us, and he prayed fervently that it might not rain, and for 3 years and 6 months it didn't rain on the earth. But he prayed again, and the heaven gave rain, and the earth yielded its harvest. My brothers and sisters, if anyone among you wanders from the truth and is brought back by another, you should know that whoever brings back a sinner from wandering will save the sinner's soul from death, and will cover a multitude of sins. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. There is a lot in this reading, and many sermons and many PhDs, as I always say. But I think I want to focus today on two things in particular. Firstly, money, and the second one is on prayer. Now, if you're anything like me, I found the first half of that chapter very uncomfortable, because across across the world, I'm sure that I'd count amongst the richest across the world, as most of us listening probably are. And listening to the book of James, if you don't read it carefully, you can almost come to the impression that basically rich people, we've all got it coming to us, and then the poor people are all going to go to heaven and this type of stuff. And if you don't read it carefully, that's the impression that you might get. Now, actually, having careful reflection, I don't think that's what James is saying. 4 reasons why. First, right, briefly. Firstly, because, as I said a couple of days ago, we are not saved by works. We're not saved even by a financial status. We're saved by faith. And faith is the difference between whether we're saved or not. Okay, so salvation is by faith, not by giving money away. That's the first thing. Second thing is, there's nothing wrong with money. You can do a lot of good with money. The Bible does not say money is the root of all evil. The Bible says the love of money is the root of evil. That's what it says. So there's nothing wrong with money per se. Thirdly, it has to be said, there are some very good, very kind and very faithful rich people. There are also some pretty nasty poor people out there as well. So that doesn't kind of square either. You know, our salvation state does not depend on how much money we've got in the bank account or haven't. But finally, and if you take a strict biblical take on this, one of the examples that James uses later is Job. And in Job chapter 1, we find that Job was a good and a faithful man and showed great endurance. But Job chapter 1 says also that Job was a rich man. So Job was faithful, but he was also rich. That doesn't quite square that either. So I don't actually think that James is saying here that basically all rich people have got it coming to them and all poor people are going to heaven. I don't think he's saying that at all. I do think, however, that he's talking to a particular situation where the church was relatively poor and there were some oppressive landowners who were giving them a hard time. And I think he has some strict words for those rich oppressors, and I think he has some encouraging words for the church at the time. And before we get too smug and too comfortable with our money, I think James does make 3 or 4 things that we do need to take into account about the way we run businesses and so on. First, he talks about paying wages. The Bible is very, very clear that if we owe people something, we should pay them. And especially if people do work for us, we must make sure that we pay, and we pay quickly. An awful lot of trouble is caused for small businesses in this society because big businesses don't pay their dues on time and that sort of stuff. So there's a huge responsibility if someone does something for us that we should pay, and we should pay out quickly. And the other thing is we should be careful that the businesses that we're involved in don't involve what he calls murder and so on. That we shouldn't be involved with companies and things which are oppressive, which are manipulative, or which get people, which end up in people being killed and that sort of stuff. So we have to be careful who we deal with, and that we should not deal with companies who are exploitative or who exploit people or the earth or whatever, and that we do have a responsibility of business, so is to behave ethically. And the other thing about money is to make sure that we know that actually, it's not permanent, and actually God is permanent. And so money's nothing wrong with money, but we shouldn't depend on money. Money is transient. God is the only thing that stays forever, and that it's all right to have money, but we shouldn't put our trust in it. Our faith should be only in God. So the message to the rich people, and the message to all of us, is to make sure, as I say, that we behave ethically in business, that we behave well, and that whilst money is all right, we must make sure that our dependency, our faith, is not in money, but our faith is in God. So that's a bit about money. There's a few thoughts for you there. It's quite heavy going, but it's important that we recognise that. But finally, he talks about prayer. And James is very big on prayer, actually. And he talks about here, really, that the people are clearly having quite a hard time. The church now he's talking to are having quite a hard time. And he gives them some price. And he basically says, pray in all situations. He basically says, if anyone's suffering, they should pray. If anyone's happy, they should rejoice and sing songs of praise. That if anyone's sick, that people should come around and pray for them. And that if people have committed sins, they should pray about them and confess them to each other in order that they might be forgiven. And he talks about the example of Elijah, who prayed and prayed hard and prayed earnestly. In his case, praying for the weather, and God listened and God did something about it. So it's importance of praying. And I think James is telling us, and I think we can learn, that whatever situation we're in, if we are sad or low or having a hard time, or if we're suffering, we can pray and bring that to God. If we're happy, bring that to God. Don't let your happiness drift you away from God. Let's not let any good times that we have stop us recognizing that all things come from God. If anyone's sick, we can pray for each other. We've got a wonderful WhatsApp prayer group here who pray in our church for people who are not well. And also, like I said, if we've committed sins, we can pray for one another too. And actually, it's quite good in church or in confession to actually hear the words spoken. You have been forgiven in the name of the Father, that kind of thing. And it's important to hear those words actually said, because sometimes we can know we're forgiven in our head, but actually to know forgiveness in our hearts, we need to hear someone say the words on God's behalf that you've been forgiven. So in this chapter, there are some thoughts about money, about making sure, as I say, that we behave ethically, that we pay up on time, and that we don't depend on our money, because ultimately all we can depend on is God. But also, there's a message here, a very important message here about prayer too, to pray in all situations. And my friends, whatever situation we're in, be it whether we're having a good time, whether we're having a bad time, whether we're poorly, whether we're feeling a bit sinful, whatever it may be, whatever situation, good, bad, or ugly, we can bring it before God. We should pray earnestly and pray firmly, and whatever situation we should bring it to God. Whatever situation we're in, as the old hymn used to say, bring it to the Lord in prayer. God bless you. Have a lovely week. Don't forget, good weekend. Don't forget the services will be streamed across the weekend from St. Bart's and St. Anne's, of course. Do keep praying. Enjoy the talks of my colleagues over the next weeks, and I'll be back